Welcome. Today we're jumping into a really fascinating and frankly critical story. We're going to explore this surprising link between centuries of incredible engineering on Europe's rivers and the devastating floods that seem to be constantly in the news. You've seen the images, right? The valleys in Belgium, the plains of Germany. These catastrophic floods have become a recurring nightmare. But what if these weren't just isolated, tragic incidents of bad weather? What if they're all connected by a single continent-wide policy?
The source material we're digging into today uses this really powerful metaphor. Imagine thousands of dominoes, all set up across the entire continent. The idea is that one little push, one policy change, can set off a chain reaction that travels for hundreds, even thousands of miles, right through Europe's arteries, its rivers.
Okay, so to get our heads around this, here's our plan. We'll start with that domino effect, then we'll jump back in time to look at the history of water control. After that, we'll uncover the huge policy reversal that changed everything, look at the real price of that change, and finally, ask what it all means for the future.
Right, let's get into it. Let's talk about that first domino. To really get what's happening, we have to understand this one core concept that connects every single river, dam, and floodplain.
The source actually gives this idea a name, the water chain. And it's a simple idea, but it's incredibly powerful. Europe's rivers, they aren't just separate streams of water. Nope, they're one giant interconnected system. So, something you do way up in the mountains of one country absolutely can and will have real consequences for cities down on the coast of another.
Okay, so now that we have that idea of the water chain in our heads, let's take a step back in time. Because to understand why this system is so fragile today, we have to look at how it was controlled for centuries.
You know, for hundreds of years, the story of progress in Europe was really the story of controlling water. Taming wild rivers wasn't just a nice idea, it was the foundation for everything. For building cities, growing food, and, crucially, for protecting millions of people from the raw, unpredictable power of nature.
For generations, society faced a pretty clear choice. On one side, you have wild, unpredictable rivers that could just bring total chaos. And on the other, the promise of safety, transportation, food, and energy, all of it made possible by building dams and dikes. For a very long time, that choice was a no-brainer.
But then, toward the end of the 20th century, all that accepted wisdom, centuries of it, was turned completely upside down. A huge ideological shift started to happen, and it would change the face of Europe's rivers forever. You can literally see this reversal play out in just a few decades. I mean, for most of the 20th century, control meant progress. Simple as that. But then, starting in the 90s, this powerful new environmental idea took hold, the idea of rewilding rivers, letting them run free. And this wasn't just talk. It became an actual continent-wide policy, leading to the removal of the very things that had managed these rivers for generations.
And that brings us to the really crucial question. What's the real-world price of this freedom? What happens when you start taking apart a system that's been in place for centuries?
Just look at the scale here. This isn't just a few little projects. We are talking about hundreds of barriers taken out on the Loire in France, the Elbe in Germany, the Ebro in Spain. We see it happening near those flood-hit towns like Pepinster in Belgium, and even over in Poland. The dominoes, they're falling everywhere.
The source material uses a really specific Dutch term for this, gevolgschade. It translates to consequential damage. The best way to think about it is like a hidden price tag. It's not just about the water itself, but about all the unintended knock-on effects that ripple outwards, long after the construction crews have gone home.
And those costs are incredibly real. A faster, unmanaged river doesn't just look different. It can literally eat away at the foundations of bridges and roads. It can tear away at riverbanks, putting homes and entire farms at risk. I mean, can you imagine watching your property value just tank? The source even points to reports of changes in local microclimates, like more fog and humidity, as the whole landscape gets reshaped.
So the result of removing just one barrier isn't simply a faster river. It is a cascade of interconnected problems, structural, economic, even atmospheric. This is that domino effect right here in action.
So, after looking at all of this, we're left with a really fundamental question. And that brings us to our final section. What does all this mean for the future? Where do we possibly go from here?
The source material really leaves us with a challenging thought. We hear all the time that climate change is the only reason for extreme weather, but it asks us to think, are we maybe overlooking a more direct cause for some of these floods?
Could it be this well-intentioned but maybe dangerous policy of dismantling our water defenses?
I think the source puts it perfectly with this quote. Free rivers require sense, not slogans. The argument is that while the idea of a free river sounds wonderful, the reality on the ground is just deeply, deeply complex. It takes practical knowledge and foresight, not just a catchy slogan.
And that's really the core challenge this whole thing leaves us with. Of course, we all want a healthier planet, a healthier ecosystem, but the real question is, how do we find the right balance? How do we chase new ecological goals without just throwing away the centuries of hard-won wisdom about what it actually takes to live safely alongside Europe's powerful and interconnected water chain? That's the balance we have to find now.